Hi everyone, welcome to this screencast where I want to talk about function words and contrast them to content words. The content words are those really important words that carry the basic message in our sentences, and the function words are there to support them, and we need to go into some details on these function words. There's a lot to talk about with function words, so I'm going to have to separate this screencast into two separate ones because there's only a certain amount of time I can spend on one screencast before the application will stop working. So this is split into two different presentations. The first one, we'll talk about the first few sets of function words, and then the second screencast will carry on with the rest. So function words. These are the supporting words. Their job is to support the content words. Without the content words, we wouldn't have the function words. The content words provide the basic message, and the function words are there to enhance our interpretation of the content words. They add refinement or precision to our understanding of those content words, those ever important content words. So because they are there to support the content words, we always want to recognize what are the pairings of the different function words, which content words do they pair up with. So I'll review those pairings at the end of the presentation. Let's start with determiners. What is the job of the determiner? Well, they are there to support nouns, and that is why we find determiners surfacing in front of the noun. Now, it's not always immediately in front of the noun because there could be an adjective or adjective phrase in between, but somewhere soon after a determiner, you know you're going to find the noun that the determiner is supporting. How does a determiner refine the interpretation of nouns? Well, there's actually a bunch of different kinds of determiners, and each determiner gives a different kind of information about the noun entity that is being introduced. So if there's an entity that is not a very specific one, you don't need to indicate that there's any kind of specific entity in mind, we use what we call an indefinite determiner. So a and some. A is the singular indefinite determiner, some is plural. So if I say a boy or some pickles, then I don't have a specific boy or pickles in mind. It could be any old boy or pickles that we're referring to. And then we can contrast that to the definite determiner. And in a definite determiner, there is a specific entity in mind. So if I say the artistic boy, there's one particular boy I have in mind. Or if I say the pickles, there are specific pickles I have in mind. For definite determiners, we don't have a singular versus plural distinction because it's just the for both cases. Sometimes we want to be extra specific and indicate what is the proximity of the entity to the speaker. Is the entity close to the speaker in space or time, or removed from the speaker in space or time? So if I say this girl, there's a specific girl I have in mind, and I'm saying she's close to me in space or time. If I say those cucumbers, the plural, I'm saying they're removed from me in space or time. So this girl versus that girl, so this is close, that is far away. These cucumbers versus those cucumbers, these are close, those are far away. We call those guys demonstrative determiners because we're kind of demonstrating more precisely the proximity of the entity to the speaker. Then sometimes we have an entity and we don't know something about that entity, and so we're seeking information. In that case, we use an interrogative determiner. Interrogative means questioning, asking a question. So there's something about the entity, the noun entity, we don't know. We're seeking information. Which sporty girl? What cucumbers? So we don't know. We need some specification on who or what we're talking about. We call those guys interrogative determiners. Then we have possessive determiners, where we indicate who possesses that entity. His book, my gherkin. So here you may think, well, isn't that a pronoun? His and my, aren't they pronouns? Well, yeah, technically they are pronouns because pronoun is something that stands in for a noun. So instead of saying his book, I could say Gerald's book. But here, what is their role? What is their function? The function of his is to introduce a noun, and while it's introducing the noun, it gives the sense of possession, of who possesses that noun. So its grammatical role is possessive determiner, even though it's in a pronoun form. The last type of determiner is there's kind of a catch-all for anything that quantifies the number of determiners. It could be several books, many things, 9 gherkins, no books, right? If it's zero of a quantity. So quantifying determiners as the last category of determiner. Okay, moving along to verbs. What supports verbs? So we have the pre-verbal adverb. As the name kind of suggests, it comes before the verb and it's a special kind of functional adverb. So pre-verbal adverbs, we will always find them right in front of the verb. And how do they refine the interpretation of the verb? Well, we talk about how they limit the application of the verb. So if you think of verbs as events, are kind of actions or events happening through time, the preverbal adverb will limit the application. Most typically, they limit the application in the frequency. So how often does the event occur? So we have this event here. We have walking to school. This event where the head of the phrase here is the verb walk. So if we then indicate the frequency of this event, I always walk to school, never walk to school, occasionally walk to school. Any of those words that specify the frequency we call preverbal adverbs. There's another type of preverbal adverb that limits the application not in frequency but in scope. So only and just are the two basic scope narrowing preverbal adverbs. So I only walk to school. Now this, you could limit the scope in different ways. You could say I only walk to school as you're limiting the walking to this particular destination. So I only walk to school but not to work. Or you could be limiting the verb as a means of going to school. So I just walk to school but I never take the bus to school. So you're limiting the scope of how you get to school in that case. Just is a multifunctional preverbal adverb because if we pair just up here in preverbal adverb position with the past tense form of the verb, then we are saying interpret this past event as taking place in the recent past. So here we're limiting the scope of the interpretation of the timing of the event. Because in English, past, if you inflect a verb for past tense, that's not a very precise indication of time because it's just any point in history before now. So we can add precision and limit the scope by using the preverbal adverb just. Okay, degree words. Degree words is kind of a catch-all term we use for the words that support adjectives, adverbs, and prepositions. So this is the pairing for these other three content categories. They always come in front, immediately in front of the adjective, adverb, or preposition, and they refine the interpretation of the verb like this. For adjectives and adverbs, if there's a degree word in front, it will limit the degree or specify the degree to which the description applies in that case. So here we have an adjective, colorful. The degree word basically answers your question, how colorful? Very colorful, so colorful, pretty colorful. Same kind of idea with the adverbs, like loudly. If we want to indicate how loudly we're talking, we use a degree word, quite loudly, unbelievably loudly. For prepositions, it's a slightly different set of degree words. For prepositions, what we are doing is we're kind of intensifying the pathway indicated by the preposition phrase. So we have a phrase like to your room. A preposition phrase, to your room. So if I said go to your room is a pathway I want you to take. I could intensify that pathway by putting right in front of the preposition to one of these degree words. I could say go straight to your room. So if a parent says to the child go straight to your room, there's no messing with that. That means you do not vary from the pathway of getting to your room in the most direct manner possible, and you go straight there. So kind of you're intensifying the directionality of the pathway. Or if I said, if someone asked me, where's the next mailbox? I could say, oh, right around the corner. So you go around the corner, but that's it. Like you don't go beyond around the corner. So it's kind of intensifying the idea of around the corner. So there's a smaller set of degree words that work with prepositions, but they are somehow intensifying the directionality indicated by the preposition. Okay, so I think I'm going to wrap up that first screencast, and we'll go on to auxiliary verbs in the following screencast.